Surprise! I brought you your favorite cake, Evelyn. My father, James, stood in the doorway holding a bright pink box. His smile seemed more forced than genuine. Evelyn, my stepmother, glanced from the book she was reading. Her weak frame shifted slightly in the armchair. "Oh, James, that's so kind of you." I knew that look in her eyes. Gratitude mixed with suspicion. Something had been off for months now, and this was just another piece of the puzzling behavior that seemed to cling to my father recently. "Dad, did you even see what's inside this box?" I asked, eyeing him. He blinked, caught off guard by the question. James stammered, "Why, no. The bakery lady assured me it was Evelyn's favorite." I set my bag down, exhausted from my shift at the hospital, but too intrigued by my father's sudden act of kindness to ignore it. I walked over and took the box from him. I opened it, revealing a cake that clearly wasn't Evelyn's favorite. She preferred German chocolate, and this was a plain vanilla sponge cake with no decorations, almost like an afterthought. "What on earth are you doing, Laura? That wasn't for you." My father's voice rose in irritation. I just wanted to see if it really was her favorite. I handed the box to Evelyn. She looked at it, then up at James with a strained smile. "Thank you, James," she said quietly. I watched him closely. His eyes darted away from us, landing on the television screen. He sat down heavily on the couch, picking up the remote. The tension in the room grew thick as he flipped through the channels. Sighing, I turned to Evelyn. "How are you feeling today?" I asked, my voice softening. "Better, thanks to you," she replied, squeezing my hand. James grunted from the couch. "Evelyn, you know you should be looking after your health more seriously. We've talked about this." I bristled at his tone. "She's doing her best, Dad. Maybe you could help more around here instead of just criticizing." His eyes snapped to mine, a flash of anger crossing his face. "I do enough, Laura. Don't you dare tell me how to run my household." Ignoring him, I leaned closer to Evelyn. "I'll warm up some tea for you, all right?" She nodded, and I made my way to the kitchen. The faucet hissed as I filled the kettle, my mind racing. Something was definitely wrong. James's behavior had been erratic for a while now. I could see the toll it was taking on Evelyn. She had always been kinder to me than my own father. I poured hot water into a teacup, placing it on a tray with some biscuits. As I returned, I saw James standing by the window, deep in thought. He didn't glance back as I re-entered the room, enveloping Evelyn in idle chatter about my day. "Evelyn," I said, setting the tray down beside her, "let's have our tea together." James turned suddenly, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and resolve. "Laura, I need to talk to you alone," he said, moving towards the hallway. "Not now, Dad. Evelyn needs me." "This can't wait," he insisted, gripping my arm. His touch sent a shiver down my spine. For the first time, I saw a real fear in his eyes. What had he done? "Okay," I relented, breaking free of his grasp. I followed him down the hall, away from Evelyn, who watched us with concern. When we were out of earshot, James whispered, "Listen, Laura, just mind your own business. You don't understand everything going on." I crossed my arms, meeting his gaze head-on. "Make me understand, then. Because right now, none of this makes sense." He paced the small hallway, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Stay out of it, Laura, for your own good." He disappeared into his study, closing the door sharply behind him. I stood there, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Evelyn needed me now more than ever, and no forced smiles or suspicious gifts were going to keep me from protecting her. The air was thick with tension when I returned to the living room, carefully balancing the tea tray in my hands. Evelyn gave me a feeble smile, her eyes searching mine for answers. I put the tray down and sat beside her. "Everything okay, dear?" she asked softly. I hesitated and nodded. "Just some family stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." James reappeared, his expression stony as he glanced at us. "I'm going out," he announced abruptly, grabbing his coat and keys from the hook by the door. "Where are you going, Dad?" I couldn't mask the suspicion in my voice. "Just taking care of business," he grunted, not meeting my eyes. I watched as he left, the door slamming shut behind him. Evelyn reached out, her frail hand trembling as she clutched my arm. "Laura, please, I know something's wrong. It's been this way for a while now." I sighed, carefully choosing my words. "There's a lot going on, Evelyn. But I promise I'll take care of it. You just focus on getting better." She leaned back, her eyes closing momentarily. "I trust you, Laura. Just be careful." Balancing my demanding job and caring for Evelyn was no simple task. Night shifts as a nurse left me exhausted, but Evelyn's well-being was my priority. After James left, I prepared Evelyn's medications, making sure her diet and rest were taken care of meticulously. The next morning, James was already gone when I awoke. I took the opportunity to go through his study. I rifled through papers, finding nothing but ordinary bills and documents. Frustration gnawed at me. What was he hiding? Later at work, my mind kept drifting back to James. Evelyn's health was deteriorating, and his indifference seemed almost cruel. Reflecting, I remembered moments from my childhood. He was a strict man, always demanding excellence, but he was never this distant, this secretive. Back home, Evelyn sat quietly, watching television. She perked up when she heard me. "Laura, could you help me with my walker?" "Of course," I said, rushing to her side. Every step she took seemed labored, and it pained me to see her struggle. She reached her favorite chair, easing into it with a tired sigh. "Thank you, dear," she whispered, looking more tired than ever. "Dad here?" I asked, knowing the answer. "No. Out again. He didn't say where." I knelt beside her. "Evelyn, I think Dad's hiding something. His behavior, his sudden absences, it doesn't add up." Her expression turned somber. "I felt it too, Laura. I didn't want to say anything, but I think it's about money. I found papers suggesting bank accounts I didn't know about." This was the missing piece. My suspicions solidified into something more tangible. "We need to find out what he's doing," I said firmly. Evelyn gave a small nod. "Just be careful. He's not the man he used to be." I hugged her gently, determination set in my mind. That night, I lay in bed formulating a plan. My father was hiding something, and whatever it was jeopardizing Evelyn's life. The next evening, James came home, his face flushed, eyes avoiding mine. I cornered him as he attempted to brush past. "Dad, you need to tell me what's going on," I demanded. He hesitated, glancing down the hall towards Evelyn's room. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered. "Try me," I shot back. He shook his head. "Go to your room, Laura. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns Evelyn, and that means it concerns me," I insisted. His silence only fueled my resolve. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Next time you go out, I'll follow you." His face paled, and for a brief moment I saw fear. Without another word, he walked away, leaving me standing there, heart pounding. If he had secrets, I was going to uncover them all. That night, I vowed to protect Evelyn at any cost, even if it meant unraveling the darkest sides of our family. Evelyn's coughing echoed through the house the next morning. I rushed to her side, finding her pale and struggling to breathe. "Evelyn, we need to get you to the hospital," I murmured, helping her into a sitting position. "No, Laura, I can't. It's just a cough," she protested weakly. "Just a cough?" I repeated, my anger flaring. "This is serious. You're getting worse." She met my eyes, tears welling up. "I'm scared, Laura." "We're going. No arguments," I insisted, grabbing my coat and supporting her to the car. The drive to the hospital was tense, filled with short, worried exchanges. At the hospital, the doctor, Dr. Richardson, took us into his office after running some tests. "Evelyn's condition is more severe than we initially thought," he said gently. "She has a treatable illness, but we need to act swiftly." I nodded, feeling a mix of panic and relief. "What can we do?" "We'll start a treatment plan immediately. With her weakened state, it's crucial we monitor her closely." James arrived late to the hospital, looking harried. "What's going on?" he demanded, spotting me in the waiting room. "She's very sick, Dad. The doctor said it's severe but treatable. Where were you?" My voice was edged with accusation. James glanced around, avoiding eye contact. "I was at a meeting, work-related. You know that." I wasn't buying it. "She needs you, Dad. We both do. You can't keep disappearing." His expression darkened. "You think you're the only one concerned about Evelyn? I'm doing my best." "Your best?" I shot back. "Then prove it. Be here. Help her." Evelyn was moved to a private room, hooked up to an array of machines. James and I sat by her bedside. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the beeping of medical equipment. She woke up briefly, reaching out for James. "Please, no more arguments," she whispered. He sighed heavily, taking her hand. "I promise." But promises were fragile things in our house. As the days passed, James's absences grew more frequent. His phone calls became quieter, the whispers darker. I overheard snippets of conversations that made my skin crawl. One evening, I caught him by the back door, speaking in hushed tones. "We need to expedite this. The insurance money is vital. My blood ran cold. I stepped closer, straining to hear. It's just taking too long. We need to move quickly, he continued, the urgency clear in his voice. I slipped away before he could notice me, my mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. His indifference, the constant absences, the secretive phone calls. James was up to something far more sinister than I'd imagined. Back in Evelyn's room, she looked at me with tired eyes. "You're my rock, Laura." "I'll always be here, Evelyn," I said, forcing a smile. Evelyn's weakness became more apparent each day. Despite the doctor's efforts, she seemed to be slipping away, and James's presence was a constant reminder of the danger she faced, his true intentions cloaked in deceit. Determined to protect her, I started keeping a closer eye on James. His secrecy would be his downfall. Late one night, I followed him to his study, watching as he dialed yet another call. "We're running out of time," he whispered harshly into the phone. "I need those documents by tomorrow." Heart-pounding, I retreated quietly. The next day, I hired a private investigator, Detective Sloan. "I need answers," I told him. "And I need them fast." Sloan nodded, taking the file of information I'd gathered. "I'll find out what he's hiding, Miss Mitchell." Returning home, I looked at Evelyn, sleeping peacefully. I knew she trusted me. For her sake, I had to uncover the truth and stop James before it was too late. We were running out of time, but I was ready for the battle ahead. Over the next few days, Detective Sloan kept me updated. He uncovered some disturbing details about my father's activities, but the picture wasn't complete yet. I tried to stay focused at work, but it was hard with so much turmoil at home. One evening, Sloan called with an urgent tone. "Miss Mitchell, you need to see this." I met him at a small, nondescript cafe. He handed over a thick envelope. "I've been tracking his movements. James has frequent trips to a nearby city, meeting with a woman named Carrie Banks. She's involved in more than just an affair." Opening the envelope, I found photos of James with Carrie, clearly more than business associates or friends. Another document included records of James's secret bank accounts, money being funneled out regularly. One particular line item caught my eye, large sums being transferred to a medical company. "What's this?" I asked, pointing at the document. "That company produces medications," Sloan explained, "but not the kind prescribed by doctors. They're known for experimental treatments not approved by the FDA. James must be planning to use these drugs on Evelyn." My heart sank. It was worse than I imagined. "So he's speeding up Evelyn's death?" Sloan nodded, a grave expression on his face. "It looks that way. He's working with Carrie to siphon money and expedite Evelyn's demise to cash in on the insurance." I gripped the edge of the table, fury and fear coursing through me. "We need to stop him." "We do, but we need concrete evidence. Enough to press charges." Returning home, I found Evelyn struggling to sit up in bed. "Hey, let me help you," I said, rushing to her side. "Thank you, Laura," she whispered, weak but grateful. As I settled her into a comfortable position, I thought about the evidence in my bag. I had to protect her, but I also needed to act carefully. James was more dangerous than I'd ever known. Later that night, I heard James sneaking out again. This time I followed him. He drove to a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. Watching from a safe distance, I saw Kari meet him at the door. They talked for a while before disappearing inside. The next morning, Evelyn seemed weaker. Every little thing took a toll on her. I decided to confront James that night. But before I could, Sloan called again, urging caution. "We need more evidence. Don't tip him off yet." It was hard to wait, my anger boiling under the surface. I spent the day caring for Evelyn, making sure she was comfortable while James was out. His absences were becoming more frequent and more suspicious. "Laura, you've always been there for me," she said gently as I adjusted her blanket. "Whatever happens, I know you'll do what's right." I squeezed her hand. "I won't let anything happen to you." That evening, Sloan called with another update. "James is planning something big tomorrow. Make sure you and Evelyn are safe." I felt a chill. "What do you mean?" "I uncovered emails between James and Kari. They're planning to administer something to Evelyn tomorrow night." My hands shook as I hung up. I had to act quickly. Gathering all the evidence, I made a plan. Tonight, I would keep Evelyn close and confront James in the morning with Sloane's help. James came home late, reeking of alcohol. I confronted him in the kitchen, the anger barely contained. "Where were you?" I demanded, voice low but firm. None of your business, he slurred, swaying slightly. It is my business when it concerns Evelyn, I snapped, stepping closer. I know what you're planning, Dad. He sobered up quickly, eyes narrowing. You don't know anything. Oh, I know enough, I bit back. Enough to stop you. He grabbed my arm, squeezing hard. You will stay out of this. I yanked my arm free, glaring at him. Not a chance. As he stormed out, I felt the weight of the battle ahead. But with Sloane's help, I was ready to fight to protect Evelyn. Tomorrow, everything would change. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Evelyn struggled to sit up. I helped her, gently tucking pillows behind her back. How are you feeling today? I asked softly. Tired? When? She whispered, her voice barely audible. You need to rest. I'll bring you some breakfast, I said, forcing a smile. I made my way to the kitchen, my mind racing. Today was the day we'd confront James. Detective Sloane had gathered all the evidence, and it was damning. As I prepared breakfast, my phone buzzed with a message from Sloane. We're ready. Be careful. James came down the stairs looking surprised to see me. You're still here? I took the day off, I replied coldly. He frowned, but said nothing. I set a tray with oatmeal and tea in front of Evelyn, who gave me a weak smile. Thank you. Laura. James hovered in the doorway, eyes flicking between us. Laura, we need to talk. Later, I said, focusing on Evelyn. Annoyed, he retreated to his study. Evelyn gripped my hand, her eyes filled with concern. Be careful with him, Laura. I will, I assured her. Just rest. I waited for Sloane's signal. Time seemed to crawl by, every minute filled with tension. Finally, my phone buzzed again. It's time. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the study. James looked up, annoyed. What now? I shut the door behind me. We need to talk, Dad, about Evelyn, about everything. He smirked. What's there to talk about? These, I said, laying the photos and documents on his desk. His face paled as he glanced through them. Where did you get these? He demanded, voice shaking. Doesn't matter, what matters is we know the truth, he sneered. You think you're clever, don't you? You have no idea how deep this goes. Sloane chose that moment to step in, his presence imposing. Actually, we do, Mr. Mitchell, and we have enough to bring you down. James lunged towards the door, but Sloane blocked him. You're not going anywhere. Evelyn's weak voice called out from the living room. James, what's happening? I rushed to her side. It's okay, Evelyn. Everything's going to be okay. James was escorted back to the living room by Sloane, his face twisted in anger. You hired a detective, your own father? To protect Evelyn? Yes, I replied fiercely. Evelyn looked between us, confusion and hurt etched across her face. James, is this true? His silence was damning. Sloane laid out the evidence, detailing the secret bank accounts, the illicit medications, and the plan to hasten her death for insurance. Evelyn trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. You were going to kill me? She whispered, voice breaking. James looked defeated, but not remorseful. It wasn't supposed to be like this. No, I interrupted. You made it like this. Evelyn sobbed, the betrayal cutting deep. Sloane called the police, and within minutes they arrived to arrest James. He resisted, shouting profanities, but they hauled him away. Evelyn's devastated face tore at my heart. I held her close, whispering, We're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore. The room was heavy with the aftermath, but there was also a sense of relief. The danger had passed, but the pain of betrayal lingered. Sloane stayed a while longer, ensuring all the necessary details for pressing charges were in place. Before he left, he placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Laura. She needed you, and you were there. As night fell, I sat by Evelyn's side, holding her hand. We'll get through this together. Thank you, she murmured, eyes closing in exhaustion, for everything. Exhausted but relieved, I watched over her, promising silently to protect her always. The storm had passed, but the journey to healing was just beginning. With James out of our lives, we could finally start to rebuild. The next morning, the house felt eerily quiet without James's presence. Evelyn stirred weakly in her bed, the weight of yesterday's events still heavy on her. I sat beside her, holding her hand, trying to offer some comfort. Evelyn, how are you feeling? I asked softly. She looked up at me, eyes red from tears. I don't know, Laura. I feel empty, betrayed. I squeezed her hand gently. We'll get through this, together. The doorbell rang, interrupting our moment. Detective Sloane stood at the doorstep, a serious expression on his face. Laura, Evelyn, may I come in? Of course, I I replied, stepping aside to let him in. Sloane took a seat in the living room, glancing between us. We have James in custody. He's confessed to most of the charges, but there's something you should know. My heart raced. What is it? He mentioned Carrie Banks. She's involved in more than just the financial fraud and the attempt on Evelyn's life. She's part of a larger criminal network we've been trying to dismantle for years. Evelyn's eyes widened. A criminal network? Sloane nodded. James got entangled with them through Kari. She lured him with promises of quick money and ways to get rid of obstacles. I felt a chill go down my spine. So it wasn't just about the money? No, Sloane replied. It was about power and control. Kari and her associates preyed on vulnerable individuals like James to further their own agenda. Evelyn looked crushed. How did it get this far? Sloane sighed. Greed can make people do horrible things. But you're safe now. We're working on bringing everyone involved to justice. After Sloane left, Evelyn and I sat in silence for a long while. The weight of the revelation settled over us like a dark cloud. I could see the pain etched on her face, the betrayal cutting deep. Evelyn, I promise you, we'll move on from this, I said, trying to sound hopeful. We'll find a way to rebuild our lives. Tears welled in her eyes. I never expected this. From James. He was supposed to protect us. My heart ached for her. People change, Evelyn, sometimes for the worse. But we have each other. She nodded slowly. You're right. Thank you, Laura, for everything. In the days that followed, I assisted Sloane in building the case against James. I provided all the evidence we had collected, ensuring every detail was accounted for. It was painstaking work, but necessary to ensure James faced the full consequences of his actions. One evening, as I was going through the files, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Mr. Tanaka, our retired neighbor. He had always been kind and caring, a reliable presence in our lives. Laura, I heard about James. I'm so sorry, he said, stepping inside. Thank you, Mr. Tanaka. It's been a tough time, I replied. He nodded, his face lined with concern. If you need anything, I'm here. Don't hesitate to ask. I appreciate that, I said, genuinely grateful. We're just trying to get through this, one day at a time. Mr. Tanaka stayed for a while, offering words of comfort and support. His presence was a reminder that we weren't alone in this fight. As the trial date approached, I prepared myself for the inevitable showdown. Evelyn's health had stabilized, but the emotional toll was heavy. She needed me now more than ever. One night, as I sat by her bed, she reached out and took my hand. Laura, promise me something. Anything, Evelyn. Promise me you'll live your life. Don't let this consume you. I want you to be happy. I nodded, tears in my eyes. I promise. She smiled weakly. Thank you. With each passing day, the strength of our bond grew, a testament to the power of love and resilience. The road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but together we were ready to face it. The day of the trial arrived, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination as I walked into the courthouse with Evelyn by my side. Her frail hand clutched mine tightly, a silent promise that we would face this together. Inside, the courtroom was buzzing with murmurs and whispers. Reporters had shown up, their cameras flashing as we entered. James was already there, seated at the defendant's table, his expression cold and unrepentant. As we took our seats, Evelyn leaned over and whispered, "Are you ready for this?" I nodded, squeezing her hand. "We have to be." Detective Sloane approached us, his presence reassuring. "Remember, just tell the truth. We have a strong case." The judge called the court to order, and the proceedings began. The prosecutor laid out the charges against James, detailing his crimes and the evidence we had gathered. James's lawyer tried to paint a sympathetic picture, but the evidence was overwhelming. It was my turn to testify. As I took the stand, I glanced at Evelyn. Her eyes were filled with support, her presence giving me strength. I recounted everything we had discovered, the secret bank accounts, the shady dealings with Carrie Banks, and the plot to hasten Evelyn's death. James stared at me, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and desperation. "Laura, you're making this up?" he shouted suddenly, causing the judge to bang her gavel. "Order in the court," the judge demanded. "Mr. Mitchell, you will remain silent until it's your turn." I continued, detailing the emotional and physical toll his actions had taken on Evelyn. The room was silent, everyone hanging on my every word. When I finished, I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I left the stand. Evelyn was next, her voice trembling but steady. She spoke of the fear and betrayal she had felt, the sense of helplessness as she watched the man she loved turn into a stranger. James snapped, his facade cracking. "You were always weak, Evelyn. You never understood what it took to get ahead." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Mitchell, that is enough." Evelyn's tears flowed freely, but she didn't waver. "I loved you, James, but you destroyed that love with your greed." The prosecutor presented the final piece of evidence, recorded phone calls between James and Kari, detailing their plans. The jury's faces hardened, their decision becoming clearer with each damning word. Finally, it was James's turn to speak. He stood, a bitter smile curving his lips. "I did what I had to do to survive. Evelyn was holding me back. Laura, you're just like her." His words cut deep, but I refused to let them break me. The judge gave her final instructions to the jury, and they retired to deliberate. Minutes felt like hours as we waited, the tension in the room palpable. When the jury returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The relief was immediate, the weight lifting off my shoulders. James was led away in handcuffs, his face twisted in rage. Outside the courthouse, Evelyn and I stood together, the sun shining down on us. Detective Sloan joined us, a satisfied smile on his face. "You did it." "We did it," I corrected, looking at Evelyn. "Now we can start to heal." As we walked away from the courthouse, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. Evelyn's grip on my hand was strong, her eyes filled with hope. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to rebuild our lives. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with James behind bars and the truth finally out, we were free. Free to move forward, to find joy and strength in each other. And that was the victory we had fought so hard to achieve. The days following James's conviction were a whirlwind of emotions. With him out of our lives, Evelyn and I tried to find our footing, slowly reclaiming some semblance of normalcy. Our home, once a battleground, now felt like a sanctuary. One morning, as I helped Evelyn with her breakfast, she looked at me with a sense of calm that I hadn't seen in months. "Laura, I want to thank you," she said softly. "You don't need to thank me, Evelyn," I replied, placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. "I did what anyone would do." She shook her head. "No, you did more than that. You saved me. You saved us." Just then, my phone rang. It was Sloan. "Laura, I have good news. James won't be getting out anytime soon. He's been sentenced to the maximum penalty." A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Sloan, for everything," he chuckled softly. "You did the hard part. Now it's time to move forward." Later that week, we received a visit from an attorney handling James's assets. "Given the circumstances, there's a significant amount left in Evelyn's name," he explained, spreading documents across the table. "You'll need to decide how to proceed." Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. "All this time I thought we were struggling." "He kept secrets from everyone," I said, glaring at the papers. "But now we can use this money for your care and our future." Evelyn nodded. "Let's make something good out of this. Maybe start a foundation to support victims of domestic fraud and abuse." I smiled, proud of her resilience. "That's a wonderful idea, Evelyn." Over the next few weeks, we worked on setting up the foundation. The sense of purpose helped mend our shattered spirits, giving us a new goal to strive towards. We collaborated with Sloan and other community members who offered their support. One evening, we held a small event at our home to launch the foundation. Friends and neighbors gathered, including Mr. Tanaka, who raised a toast, "To new beginnings and to the strength and courage of Evelyn and Laura." Evelyn's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you, everyone," she said, her voice strong despite her fragile state. "This foundation represents hope and a new chapter for all of us." The room erupted in applause, and I felt a swell of pride. We had turned a nightmare into a beacon of hope for others. As the guests mingled and chatted, Sloan pulled me aside. "You've done a remarkable thing here, Laura. Your determination to fight for justice is inspiring." "Thank you, Sloan. I couldn't have done it without you," I replied. He nodded, his expression sincere. "Evelyn is lucky to have you, and so is this community." The days continued to improve. I transitioned to a part-time job at the hospital, allowing me to focus more on Evelyn and our foundation. We spent our mornings planning events and our afternoons enjoying simple pleasures, like gardening or taking walks in the park. One day, as we sat in the garden, Evelyn turned to me. "Laura, I finally feel at peace." I never thought I'd say that after everything we've been through. I reached for her hand, feeling the strength that had carried us both through the darkest times. We've come a long way, Evelyn, and we still have a beautiful journey ahead. With James gone and his vile nature exposed to the world, we were free to live without fear. The shadow he cast over our lives had lifted, replaced by a future filled with love, purpose, and newfound strength. Together, we had faced the storm and emerged stronger. And now, with a foundation built on the ruins of his betrayal, we found a way to heal and help others find their strength. We were survivors, and our story was just beginning.